Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're here for a live stream broadcast so that you can get your questions answered live. So make sure you join the live stream chat on the side of your screen. If you don't see it, poke around and turn it on. Make sure you're in the live chat so you can ask questions live. We're going to talk with Andy Schectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. We also have Elijah Johnson, our co-producer and co-host here at Liberty and Finance. Gentlemen, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Great to be here, fellas. Good to see you both.
Great to have you, Andy, and thank you so much, Ted.
The headline topic we wanted to kick off with tonight is what is going on with the Russian ruble, promised or debated about whether it's going to be backed by gold, and what that will do to shift the playing field, shift the game. A lot of people talk about the dollar is so strong. The dollar is so strong because they're talking about the DXY, the Dixie index, and how it's compared to other currencies, primarily the euro and the Japanese yen. But for a long time, people who are unconventional observers and analysts in the financial arena have been warning that both China and Russia appear to have been accumulating physical precious metals hand over fist for a long time, and potentially poising to wait for a time when the West looked weak to come out with gold-backed currencies, which would completely be a game changer for the financial world, the monetary world at least. Andy, would you be willing to weigh in on the most recent developments there, where it looks like there's maybe a arm wrestling going on even within Russia between the Kremlin, those who would and did not want there to back the ruble with gold, and what if they succeed at that, what you think that'll do to change the game globally?
Yeah, I've been saying on your show and others for quite some time now that whatever new global monetary system rises, whatever it looks like, I think it will be dominated by countries like Russia and China and Saudi Arabia and India, who will use commodity-backed resources, gold or oil or whatever it may be, to peg itself to a new standard, compared to the West, who has the infinite fiat printing, debt-based system that is, I think, coming to an end very rapidly. The article that was that has created a lot of buzz was one that was written in a Russian newspaper, and it was translated into English, which it basically said that the Russian government was interested in pegging the ruble to gold and a basket of other commodities, and simple equation of pegging the ruble to gold is basically what everyone took away from it. And quite frankly, I think it is, whether it's early or whether it happens now with the ruble, I think ultimately it will be the fate of a new world reserve currency. So much so that you had Fed Chairman Powell come out recently and talk about there being room for more than one world reserve currency. I truly do believe the only way that the world will ever accept a new currency or a new system is to peg it to gold. And I think this is going to be a deal that isn't going to happen slowly over time. It's not going to be a slow transition or slow accumulation. I think it'll manifest all at once. And I've been saying that for quite some time. I ask people all the time, what makes the dollar the world reserve currency? And it's startling to me. No one really ever gets the answer right. Very few people do. I asked that question to several people I talked to today. Do you know what makes the dollar the world reserve currency? And the answers range the whole gambit. It used to be that we were backed by gold, as everyone knows, and Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. And it was rendered fiat for 3 years until Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and struck a deal with the Saudis to protect them, to a joint military cooperation arrangement, to provide them with munitions and support militarily. For that, they would denominate oil globally in dollars. And I have been screaming from the rooftops since September of 2021. The day we left Afghanistan was the beginning of the end for the US dollar as the singular world reserve currency. Because the day after that, Russia, as we've talked about, struck a deal with Saudi Arabia and the next day with Nigeria to protect them. They called it a joint military cooperation agreement. For the first time in nearly 50 years, someone else is protecting the Saudis or joining in on the protection, the bodyguard, if you will, who has nuclear weapons. And the day after they struck the deal with Nigeria, as I've talked about, they announced the hypersonic ICBMs, that they have them in their nuclear powered submarines. The State Department came out quickly after and said, we're concerned about this. This is a technology we don't have. But that was their way of saying, don't think about doing to us what you did to Saddam Hussein and to Gaddafi for threatening to sell their oil in another currency. But this has gone much further. And now you see these deals being struck. Nigeria agreeing to sell their oil for yuan, Saudi Arabia and China in these deep conversations. As far as I'm concerned, that deal's been struck as well. You're seeing unilateral deals all around the BRICS nations usurping the dollar. And let's not forget that when you talk about what's happened with the Chinese the digital yuan that I've talked about, kind of backstopping the new Chinese Belt Road Initiative. CNN, can't even believe I'm saying this. A good friend of mine sent me an article, and it was interesting. CNN quoted that in the second half of 2021, $8 billion worth of transactions had already transpired under the new Chinese digital yuan. Now, take a step back. You got the Chinese Belt Road Initiative connecting 75% of human population. These are all things we have discussed ad nauseum on your show. 75% of the world using the new digital yuan. You got the two biggest OPEC producing countries in the world agreeing to sell their oil for yuan, and those yuan payments for oil are backed by gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. They are redeemable and convertible into gold immediately on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. It's called the Chinese Petro Yuan Bond. So you have 3/4 of human population being indoctrinated into a new currency. You have the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, the petro reserve status in the countries that have implemented it, already agreeing to transition away from singular dollar status into other currencies for oil. It's the beginning of the end. It's a transition that will happen very, very quickly. I believe we will wake up one day to a new reality. And when so few people understand what it is that gives the dollar its hegemony, its status as the world reserve currency, and yet even fewer people understand that that status is in question and is actually transitioning right away from us, right before our eyes, it is frightening to me. It will catch many, many people, more people than it won't. Almost everybody will be caught off guard when this transition happens. And so, yeah, I think the inevitability of this, whether it happened, look, there's infighting in Russia. You got one of the head, in fact, I have what he was called here. The gentleman, Nikolai Patrushev, is the secretary of the Russian Federation Security Council. He says this is going to happen. And you got someone else in the Kremlin saying, well, no, we're really not going to do it. The bottom line is the genie's been let out of the bottle. And whether Russia is the one that initiates the backing of a currency with gold, or it's a joint effort, which I believe it will be with the BRICS nations, with a currency like the digital yuan, which will be rolled out to 3/4 of human population. And what better technology but a distributed ledger to use the veracity, or to show the immutability or the veracity of all of this gold that China and Russia and India and South Africa and Brazil and all of these countries have accumulated. And let's not forget about the tier 1 revision of gold. All of these countries have it. It's now considered a tier 1 asset, and they are massively accumulating it and have been using the suppressed price to accumulate it. If they want to roll out a currency that has massive legitimacy, not only that, you put all of these countries together. You have, as we've talked about, 1 billion people in the West and 7 or 8 times that everywhere else. All of these people using a new digital currency. All of these countries are big accumulators of gold. So yeah, I think you will see a BRICS nation coordinated effort to issue a currency that will compete with the dollar as singular world reserve. It's happening right in front of us. I think it will happen like that. We're going to wake up to a new reality where they've agreed to it. And the frightening part about all of this is what happens when this happens. You got the Fed meeting tomorrow, and they're talking about a 50 or maybe even a 75 basis point increase, 0.5%, 0.75%. Yet you have inflation at 9%. It's a joke. The Fed is talking about running off 60 or $75 billion a month in assets. It's a joke, right? They have $9 trillion balance sheet. So they're talking about using bubble gum to fix and baling wire to fix a big leak that's about to spring. The market will dictate what happens ultimately in an event like that. If all of a sudden there is an announcement that the dollar is no longer the singular settlement currency for oil globally, in a matter of hours, everything in this country will change as dollars come flooding home, popping up interest rates and crushing stocks, bonds, and real estate and the dollar at the same time. There's your Klaus Schwab Great Reset. So whether it emanates from Russia or not, the fact that they're talking about it, the fact that there is a coordinated effort amongst these BRICS nations to break the dollar hegemony, to break away from the iron fist of sanctions and sanctions that in many cases you could view as fascist, where a country can dictate the terms of who deserves to use the world reserve currency or not. We have initiated this ourselves. We have precipitated this ourselves. And when you weaponize the world reserve currency, you're asking for trouble. And the countries that we are messing with all own the gold. All of the gold has been flowing to these countries over the last several years. They're the largest importers, the largest accumulators, the largest producers of it. And we're all going to wake up to a new reality when they say, well, we really have a lot more gold because we haven't told you what we have. But here it is, all pegged to a distributed ledger, backing our new digital BRICS nations currency on the back of the new Chinese digital yuan. Oh, and by the way, our new BRICS Road Initiative is connecting 3/4 of human population. And welcome to the new currency standard, 3/4 of the world, and we will be shut out in the cold. I've been saying this for a long time, and I think it will happen. And I think what you are seeing are the pieces of the puzzle being put into place to make this happen.
One of the things that has forestalled that, and you mentioned this earlier when you said, Russia was making certain announcements about certain military equipment availability and readiness to prevent what had happened before. Because what had happened before, the way the story is told by some analysts, is that any leader, any political leader in any geopolitical arena who in the past has said, we're going to step away from the dollar, we're going to turn and pivot this other direction, suddenly found their country invaded, or found that they were no longer the leader of that country, or found that they were no longer alive. And Gregory Mannarino, for one, talks about the dollar being maintained not by the full faith and credit of the United States, but by the full military might of the U.S. military forces. So this sounds like serious business. It isn't just a matter of gamesmanship of stacking up, gold and making alliances and that sort of thing. There's this the big stick that's been looming for decades and decades and decades. And how do we get through that, in your view, safely for the next decade here?
I don't think we do. I mean, I hate to be pessimistic, but I mean, when you talk about Nigeria as already agreeing to sell their oil for yuan, they're part of the Belt Road Initiative. So you mess with Nigeria, you're messing directly with Russia and China. And the unification of the BRICS nations against the dollar, not only from a monetary standpoint, but militarily. You have two military powers that, and look, you have an insane left political base that, you got Nancy Pelosi and Schiff going to meet with Zelensky and saying we stand by you till the end, and spending billions of dollars and giving military equipment and drones and missiles to fight against Russia. Say what you want about the human condition; it's awful. I'm not someone who. I'm much more a pacifist than I am someone who believes in war. Say what you want about what's happening as being horrible, but what they are doing is insane. And they are pushing us, I don't know, it almost seems like they're trying to push us into a war with Russia. And the things that they are doing, if you ask me, are provocation of it. Just because we're not sending our troops there, we're providing intelligence, we're providing weaponry, we're providing assistance on every level except sending our own troops in. And if you ask me, really, what is the difference? If this was a war between us and Mexico, and Russia was providing all of the military assistance to Mexico and all of the everything except sending their soldiers here, from the drones to the missiles to the intelligence, I think the people in this country would feel a little bit different about it. And again, I'm not an expert on geopolitical affairs, but I can tell you that from where I sit, it's as if we are already putting our hat into the World War III ring, and God forbid that happens. I hope I'm wrong. But, when you talk about this system being thrust upon the BRICS nations, we are to blame, in my opinion, for the demise of the dollar. We are weaponizing the dollar. We are pushing everyone away from the dollar and putting them into a position where I think they have no choice but to try and find alternative plans, like the SIP system, as we've talked about, the cross interbank payment system, which allows them to usurp SWIFT. And it's coming, and anyone who doesn't see it is not paying attention. And I don't know, I think it's getting a little bit scary, actually. And then you throw in all of the shortages of food everyone keeps talking about, and the dozens and dozens and dozens of food processing plants that have burned down over the last 12 months, and all of these things that keep happening at the exact same time. To me, I personally believe that owning precious metals has never, ever been more important, regardless of what the price is doing right now. The powers that be are trying to keep the biggest challenger to the dollar hegemony, and that's gold. They're trying to keep it on the sidelines, and that's not going to last. It's not going to last because of what we are doing and what we are precipitating, and it's a mass exodus from the dollar ultimately. So, when you're talking about the big stick, it's not such a big stick when you compare it to Russia and China as a unified force. In fact, quite to the contrary, it's something that we would have, I would hope we would have the sanity to try to back away from and resolve with other options rather than militarily. And, you look at a guy like Putin who's got Parkinson's and cancer, and he's getting older, and you don't want to back a guy like this into the corner. I mean, what does he have to lose at that point? I don't know. I think it's a scary thing, you guys, and I think that the politicians are making the wrong choices and the wrong decisions, and it started with kicking the Russians out of SWIFT. That was the beginning of the end, I believe, of the dollar, and will ultimately lead to a gold-backed BRICS nation currency with distributed ledger technology, showing the veracity of it. And it will double. I mean, it will double not only to show the veracity of the gold behind it, but it will also do all of the things that the governments want out of a central bank digital currency, including the complete removal of privacy and the ability to impose monetary policy directly to the holder of that central bank digital currency, but it's coming. And I think we will be second to the party. I think that it will emanate in the East, and maybe as a reaction, the West will do the same thing. But I really do believe that fiat currencies are ultimately on the way out, and the likelihood of central bank digital currencies pegged to gold grows every day. I remember the first time we talked about this on your show was March of 2020, and Nancy Pelosi said viruses can live on paper currency, and to me that was the beginning of the end of the dollar as we know it, and the ushering in of central bank digital currencies. But the weaponizing of the dollar has, I think, incentivized our foes to beat us to the punch. And I really do believe that what Russia is talking about will ultimately spill over into a BRICS unified gold-backed currency.
Now we have a question from Jake here regarding, it does tie into this idea that we're going to a gold-backed currency, or at least some countries may be going to a gold-backed currency. Jake is wanting to know, at what point will the other world mints stop exporting precious metals to the rest of the world? So I think this gets to, like, at what point is there not going to be availability of retail product? What point, if precious metals become so popular by being mainstream, governments are backing their currencies with precious metals, will world mints even be releasing them as like retail products?
Yeah.
What kind of an environment will that be for the retail product? For
let me piggyback on that before you jump in, Andy. And that is, not only will it be popular at Eli, as you're saying, it's coming out of the shadows. Andy's been saying for a long time, there's been this big distraction of don't look at it in the US, whereas China and India in particular have been like encouraging their citizens to own it. That's one thing. But the other thing is, and there was another question in the stream, I'm sorry, it's off page now, but another viewer was asking the same related question, that is, when will it be deemed a strategic asset? Just like Russia is saying, we are not going to release our natural gas, we're not going to release, the fertilizer or whatever these real commodities are. They are now realizing that those are not realizing, they've realized it for a long time. Those are strategic assets. So Andy, back to you, as far as precious metals, not just a popular retail product, but a strategic asset that countries may jealously guard.
These are all the things that have gone into my thinking, you guys, when I've been talking about ultimately not being able to get product, and everyone has accused me of trying to push people into buying metals. Look, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And I, quite frankly, you can see it happening right now. Look how hard it is to get sovereign issued coins, because you have already an awakening globally. You got inflation across the globe at 50-year highs or longer. Going all the way back to World War II. So you can go all the way back to the 40s. You have inflation all throughout Western Europe and Asia. Inflation is roaring. You have an awakening by people who saw what Trudeau did. This is an action where the donation to the truckers was legal and retroactively froze accounts. This is a fascist move by what a dictator would do. People have said, well, wait a second, could that be me next? We've kicked the Russians out of SWIFT, and the rest of the world is saying, could that be next for us? And so you have competition globally for, look, there's only 6 major mints in the world: US, Canada, Austria, Australia, South Africa, United Kingdom. China doesn't hardly release anything, nor does Mexico. There are a few others that amount to nothing. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that those mints are selling to the public the way they are. In fact, in 2020, I remember talking to Shay Russell, who used to work for Agora. I think she's working for an Australian precious metals company now, but we had a long conversation, and she would tell me that there was no gold to be found for Australians in Perth, yet that year, there were reports of Australia sending, ships filled with gold kilos to help the COMEX market. We had been getting gold and silver Australian coins for the last few years. And the year after 2020, when Shay and I spoke again, she told me that was the same thing was happening with silver, that the people couldn't get silver from the window at Perth. at the mint, but yet we were getting 50, 60, 70, 100,000 silver kangaroos at a time being shipped over here. They were ignoring their own populace in favor of big wholesale business in North America. But the thing of it is that all of a sudden, the rest of the world is waking up to the reasons behind buying precious metals, namely out of control inflation and stupid governments making stupid decisions. People are waking up. You have way more people competing for these strategic assets. And the thing of it is that the whole Western world, courtesy of Keynesian economics, has been brainwashed into believing gold is an archaic, barbaric relic of the past. And there is a gradual awakening that this isn't the case. Now, a lot of people have woken up, but have woken up on the side of cryptocurrencies. And, the awakening process, nevertheless, is the important thing. I think a lot of those people will also realize the relevance of precious metals before it's all said and done. But to your point, you have a much greater awareness globally, and it's becoming really hard to get coins from those sovereign mints. It really, truly is. Wait until something happens that all of a sudden makes people believe that, oh my God, maybe the road to retirement isn't paved with just mutual funds and stock certificates and government securities and bonds and whatnot. And like that, it happens where everyone rushes to get a very limited pool of product and there will be none. And that's when the mints will stop issuing to places like North America. And, I think, quite frankly, that's a very astute question. I think it will happen. I think it's happening. It's happening in the sense that a lot of people in these countries are for the first time really vying for the lion's share of the allotments. It's not all just coming to North America like it used to, where the North American audience was the big buyers of it. Now it's a global thing. And I think before it's all said and done, that will all factor into it. There's been so much money creation out there that it dwarfs the availability of precious metals. If everyone were to just put 1 or 2 or 3% of their assets into gold and silver, by tomorrow morning, there'd be nothing left for anyone else. So yeah, I think we're closer to that moment than we think. And when the realization and the obvious realization of it to the masses globally occurs, yeah, I think there will be an outcry from the citizens in Australia or the United Kingdom or South Africa. Why the hell are you selling all of our gold and silver to other countries when we need it here? I think that'll happen. And that's one of the reasons why you hear a lot of talk about ultimately people buying mining shares in countries that are not Western friendly, that ultimately those companies will nationalize the gold in the ground. One of the reasons why people talk about buying North American mining shares instead of those issued in South Africa or other parts of the world that maybe aren't as friendly to the US or geopolitically friendly. It's the same thing, whether it's nationalization of the mines and the gold and silver in the ground or nationalization of the actual products that were being sold by the mints. When no one wants it, it's one thing. When everyone wants it, it's a whole different thing altogether.
I wanted to challenge on one thing you mentioned, and different people have said the same thing to you, is like how stupid our banking are. I mean, Alistair MacLeod often talks about how ignorant the bankers are, or other people say how stupid the actions of government are. But I've just been a casual observer for the past several decades, and it seems far too effective at dismantling the United States' ability in every area, educationally, politically, constitutionally, militarily, on the free press, all of our abilities. It just seems to be like a real controlled demolition of our country, our culture, and our currency. It seems like too destructive to be just stupidity. Am I missing something, or is there something to that?
You're not, and it's very frightening. I think people are waking up to that. Here in Florida, Governor DeSantis shines a light upon all of this stuff, and so maybe we're a little bit more aware of it here than where I come from in Minnesota, where we weren't really aware of it, where our local government in Minnesota was the antithesis of what Ron DeSantis does here. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it starts with the children and teaching kindergartners about transgenderism, or bringing it up at Disney World. And, supposedly peaceful protests. I lived through those peaceful protests in Minnesota. Let me tell you something. That's why I moved to Florida. Those were not peaceful protests. And downtown Minneapolis still does not look even a fraction of what it used to look like just a few years ago. The things that have happened over the last few years, the dismantling of so many of the ideologies that this country stood for, the villainize, to villainize, what am I trying to say? To make capitalism out to be a bad thing in favor of socialism, to change so many of the things in this country that once we were proud to stand for, and now you are afraid to even talk to your friends about it. It's unbelievable to me, and the all of the censoring that's been going on over the last 2 years, where you can't even say certain words on a YouTube channel, the abolishment of the First Amendment, or this new group on misinformation. I mean, that's right out of a science fiction movie. These things are unbelievable. And if you put them all together, I talk a lot about a linear progression of events, and I've been looking at things from a different angle, the progression of events away from the dollar. But when you put those things into the mix the way that you've talked about, it's impossible to believe that this is coincidental. And then when you talk about, the Great Reset, and you'll own nothing and you'll like it, like I've been saying, how do you make that happen? Well, you blow up all of the asset classes, and then you destroy all demand for the dollar. And when those dollars come running home and create hyperinflation, much more than we already have right now, it will inversely dismantle stocks, bonds, and real estate, which, if interest rates spike because of an event like that, it's over. So you have all three pillars of wealth, stocks, bonds, and real estate, collapsing at the same time, and the dollar collapsing at the same time, in favor of a new gold-backed digital BRICS nations currency, and a new Belt Road Initiative, where all global trade is moving away from the dollar. And it gets really very religious. It gets real really quickly when that happens. And these are the things that I believe in my heart are going to happen. And I keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I talked about how significant the reclassification of gold was. And I mean, look at the pieces that have been put into place over the last few years. And what you just said, Dunnigan, is really very important, because that's the other piece of the puzzle. It is bringing everyone down to a common denominator on so many ways. And if you don't see these things happening in real time, then I don't think you ever will, you being the people out there listening to this. I don't see a way that this ends with a soft landing. Quite to the contrary, I think that you could make the argument that this is specifically being done to reset the whole system, because we've gone so far down the rabbit hole with debt and manipulations of interest rates that there's no way out. And now we have a villain, and his name is Putin, and he's responsible for all of the hardships that we're about to face, and for the destruction of the currency and the destruction of the markets. And it's all about this villain, instead of the light being shown upon the real culprit, and that is a Federal Reserve that has systematically destroyed the country, and a democratic socialist agenda that has permeated every aspect of our lives. And God help us for the next 3 years. You don't have to be a doctor to realize that our president doesn't have all of his faculties about him. And I'll tell you, what's standing behind door 2 and 3 scares me a lot worse. So if you don't see that there is an awakening where everyone runs to gold and silver and it's all gone, this is what I see. This is why I keep saying this, because it's getting really hard to get, and it has been for 2 years, and we haven't had the awakening yet. Most people believe this will just be fixed and papered over, and the Fed will fix it. Most people out there don't even have a clue about the things that you talk about every day, Dunnigan and Elijah, on your shows and your guests and our Tuesday conversations. Most people don't have a clue. And I can evidence that by asking the people I talk to every day who have a clue what makes the dollar the world reserve. And I have yet to have a person who gets it right. No one gets it right. And the fact that that is being broken apart as we speak, and the ramifications of that on top of all of the things that have happened to the fabric of this country, will only make the outcome that much more severe. And then you have to throw in food shortages, which you keep hearing about. Now you're talking real problems and insurrection. And I hope I'm wrong, but no, I think it's getting real. And I think it's getting more real day by day.
We have a question here again from a viewer. They're wanting to know about a topic that you've discussed many times, and you have mentioned also in this interview, the Belt and Road Initiative by China. And now they're wanting to know, with the lockdowns in China, with this really indefinite lockdown because of the coronavirus, do you think China will be able to continue that initiative, and why?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the initiative really is expanding through Africa. It has less to do with what's happening within their own borders as it does creating infrastructure through Africa, and it's creating roads and maritime channels and bridges and all of this transport infrastructure that will only be patrolled by Chinese military and African military and or commerce. So yeah, I do think they will. It's part of their agenda to expand infrastructure. And so I think, as horrible as that is, I don't think it has any impact whatsoever on their Belt Road Initiative. And here again, if I had to guess, their primary concern is, and this is a country that thinks in terms of decades and centuries, their primary concern is I think transitioning of power. Removal of the dollar hegemony, removal of the Western influence on the world. And I think they are setting up an infrastructure, starting with their military, ending with their commerce, and ultimately a currency that could very quickly replace the dollar. Look at all the pieces that they've put into place with their Shanghai Gold Exchange, with their SIPS system, with their digital yuan that's already done all of these 8 billion in transactions last year alone. The pieces are in place. If you play chess, it's very close to check, and all they have to do is turn it on. And so yeah, I don't think that what's going on internally will have one bit of effect on what they're doing on the Belt Road Initiative whatsoever.
We've also got a question about is the U.S. military, we talked about this earlier, the transition of cultural transition affecting so many aspects of our institutions, is that happening in parallel here, going to accelerate or enable the transition that you're talking about, you're hoping you're wrong about, which is, if the big stick was always being used in the past, it's not just that you've got China and Russia versus the US, it's you've got a US military that, like many parts of our corporate culture, many parts of our educational institutions and so on, is kind of trying to reinvent itself to be softer, gentler, more understanding and everything, and seems to be sort of dismantling its capability to meet its original mission.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this war will be a ground war with Asia and Russia. I'd cut my son's foot off before I'd send him to fight that war. And I think, the first bomb that would be fired at the U.S. would be a dumping of the dollar as the petrodollar. And if all of the countries immediately dump dollars in treasuries, it's over in this country. In the blink of an eye, it truly is. And I think people don't take that serious enough. Everyone says, well, there's really not a currency out there. Russia isn't ready to challenge the dollar for world reserve, nor is China or the yuan yet. But if they all join up together and they all pledge their gold with the veracity of it held on a distributed ledger, like that, it's over. The dollar, what is the dollar? The dollar is nothing except that there's lots of them and everyone has it. The dollar is nothing any longer. It's not pegged by anything. It's not backed by gold, and it is not the sole final clearing mechanism for energy. And that's what has given it its world reserve status. Yes, it's the, as Doug Casey says, the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse, but there hasn't been a challenger, a real challenger. You know, it started, the euro wanted to be, but the euro's not ready. They're dysfunctional. When countries have been, you know, for years haven't seen eye to eye, there's no way you can put them all together and be legitimate. But when you have a rallying cry from all of these BRICS nations and all of their surrounding countries and all the animosity that's been built up, I think that very quickly you could see a real challenger, one that we would not want to mess with militarily, of course. But the real trouble for the dollar would be when all of those dollars come flooding home. And that's when it ends, because in Austrian economics, they talk about a crack up boom, where a massive expansion in credit creates distortions and misallocations of resources and capital. Look around you. Look at all the expansion of credit. You know, Bill Holter talks about how many uses of credit bring a loaf of bread to the grocery store. You got the farmer who has to go on credit to buy his $500,000 combine and the diesel fuel to run it and the seeds to plant his fields. Then he plows the fields and has a trucking company who's on credit to buy their trucks, come and pick up the grain that's then brought to the flour mill that uses credit to pay its employees and run their operations, who then gives it back to the trucking company who brings it to the grocery store or to the baker, and then to the grocery store. Everyone's using credit. And if all of a sudden, as Austrian economics says, you have this massive expansion in credit, creates misallocations in resources, look around you, creates distortions in prices, look around you, then it's followed by a massive contraction in credit where everything collapses. I mean, look at the potential for real problems in this country. And I think that, you know, you talk about credit, you talk about the dollar being used, but, you know, there's been a synthetic demand for the dollar globally that has enabled us to do these things, because every country has to own it to buy oil. If you see that pulled away, and you're seeing it happen in real time right now, but when it really gets pulled away and something rises to compete against it and offer a much better solution, it becomes a really, really scary thing here quickly. And that's my thinking, has been my thinking for quite some time now, and shapes everything that I talk about. And I think it's inevitable, unfortunately. I really, truly do think it is inevitable. I don't know how we back out of this situation. And by us getting up there and sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and saying to Russia, we stand behind the Ukraine until this is over, and providing them with military intelligence and billions of dollars worth of munitions. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and kicking them out of SWIFT and stealing their money, it's a declaration of war. If you don't think that we are this close to World War III, I don't know, then maybe we look at the world a little bit differently. And I find it to be a very scary time. And I think it goes beyond gold and silver. I think if you don't have, 6 months worth of food and water and guns to protect your family and all of the things that you've been talking about, Dunnigan, forever, I think people are missing the boat. I think this is a once in a generation shift. And I think it will ultimately affect the West much, much worse than anywhere else on the planet. I think it's going to affect people in the United States in a very bad way. The level of savings in this country is very close to all-time lows. And with inflation raging, it will get there very soon. And, people are not prepared for this. And I think we are ripe for this to happen to us. So I hate to be so pessimistic, but the further along we go down this road, and all of the things that we've seen happen since 2017 just lead me to believe that ultimately this is our fate, losing the world reserve status, or at least the singular world reserve status, and having it being replaced by a commodity-backed Bretton Woods 3 concerted effort by a whole bunch of countries that are sick and tired of the dollar and the dollar policies ruling the roost. I really do think it's coming.
I think it is really interesting with everything going on right now that more people aren't jumping into precious metals. I mean, we see the stock market pulling back. We see inflation at the highest rate it's been in 40 years. We have two viewers' questions kind of asking the same thing here. Frederick is wanting to know, is the big money still flocking into gold and silver? And we have another viewer wanting to know, are the others category still loading up on metals?
Well, let's first talk about the big money. I mean, look, you got the S&P down 13% over the first 4 months of the year. That's the worst 4-month period in the S&P since 1939, since the Great Depression. And those numbers aren't even adjusted for inflation. So they're much worse than they really are. You got the Russell 2000, which is a much broader measurement of the U.S. economy, because you don't have all these big multinational companies, and they're down 11.5% on the year, 23% from its high last year. You got the NASDAQ off 7.3% this month, but off 23%, 17% for the year. And that's the worst start to the year since the NASDAQ's inception in 1971. You got savings at a 9-year low, heading lower because of inflation. You got the FANG stocks, the stocks that all the people in this country own. They're the stocks that everyone talked about holding up the markets. You got Amazon down 34% from its high, Facebook down 48%, Google down 25%, and Netflix down 73% from its peak. You got income up 0.5%, yet the cost of living up 0.9%. So the cost of living, our standard of living is going down, and you have a negative 1.4% GDP right now. All the numbers are pointing to things aren't getting any better in this country. In fact, if it weren't for all the stimulus that was pumped into the marketplace, it would be a whole lot worse. Now you got the Fed saying they're going to tighten and start to sell off their balance sheet into what looks like a recession. So when we talk about, is the big money buying gold and silver? No, the really big money really isn't buying gold and silver. Who is buying gold and silver? You got the commercial banks and the central banks. As far as the others are concerned, I will say this. March, when you add all of the exchange for physical, March might have been one of the biggest delivery months on record. But a lot of what's happening right now on COMEX is being kind of like a shell game. It's being moved to exchange for physical off the London Metals Exchange, which makes it much, much harder to discern how much gold and silver is actually being taken off of the exchange. And here with the May delivery month, I think already 9 or 10 million ounces has already moved over in silver to the LME in exchange for physical. They're making it much more difficult to discern exactly how much is being taken off of the exchanges. But I will simply say this, that I believe very strongly that the people who are pulling the strings are absolutely the ones that are taking metal off of COMEX, taking metal off the LME, taking metal off of the ETFs. But in general, the big money in the United States, the people who have become wealthy in traditional assets, who have given that responsibility to financial advisories, there's more of them buying from us than ever before, but the real big money will come in at the 12th hour, when it's very evident that the ship is going down, and that's when everything changes. So, the big buyer, they've been repositioning quietly, slowly, gradually, using the suppressed price as cover to do that. But the really big money that's in this country, all the money that's been created, no, they're the ones who are going to go down with the ship. So I guess the answer is yes and no. The insiders are absolutely continuing to accumulate and de-dollarize. But the wealthy in this country, the really wealthy people, because they have given the accountability for their own retirement, for all of their wealth to financial advisories who do not have a vested interest in purchasing physical precious metals for these people, because it's all under an umbrella of management where you're paid by the assets under the umbrella. All of these people have limited, if any, exposure to hard assets, and if they do, they're in places like GLD and SLV, which I really believe will be nationalized. The Fed will come in, or the government will come in, and they'll nationalize SLV, which is the second largest stockpile of silver in the world, administered by JP Morgan, and HSBC running GLD, the third or fourth or fifth largest stockpile of gold. People think they have exposure to gold and silver in those accounts, but they don't. So, I think I'm constantly, like you said, Elijah, constantly surprised that more people aren't seeing this. And it's almost a curse being in my position, because I want to tell people, my friends and my family, my people that I associate with so badly, about what I do and what I believe, but I won't do it because it just, most people don't want to hear it. Most people believe that this will be, okay, just like it's always been over the last few generations. And I think this time is different. And this is not the message. It's a lose-lose situation for me. And so I wish I could help more people. And I go out and I do these things, and I go out on a limb and I say these things, and I say this to the public out there. I believe it in my soul. My really good friends here in Florida and back in Minnesota, if 1 or 2% of them are watching these videos, I'd be shocked. And I don't talk to them about it unless they ask me about it, because the message that I am saying is not a popular one. But look at what's happened over the last several years, whether it be what's happening morally, socially, economically, politically, geopolitically. It's hard to refute. So yes, I think the insiders are continuing to buy, but the big money in this country, the big successful people in this country who have made a lot of money due to capitalism and hard work and ingenuity, and have put it all into traditional assets, I think are destined to go broke when this happens, and it'll happen overnight. So not enough, Elijah, not enough. But leading to why I always talk about why there'll be no product is there will come that moment when everyone wakes up, and in a matter of minutes, everything in this country will be gone, or in this industry will be gone. And that is what I ultimately see happening in terms of supply. And that's when COMEX goes force majeure and cash settlement, and everything shuts down, and GLD and SLV are nationalized and shut down, and the window gets slammed shut real quick.
I just realized, because of this part of the conversation, we've been so engrossed in this big picture about what's going on in our lives, we forgot to mention the weekly special. That's one of the things people call in for. We're only 5 minutes to the end of the hour. We haven't mentioned it yet. Sorry for those of you who've been waiting and hoping you'd hear sooner. Andy, can you let people know what you've got planned for a weekly special? And then there's one more cluster of questions that I think maybe we can hit right after that.
Sure. Elijah, maybe you can put these up on the screen one by one too. So we have, look, I cut my prices on this stuff down to the bone. And if people look around on these, they'll see this to be true. This one right here, I think, is the very best buy, period. 100-ounce brand new design Royal Canadian Mint bars. I have 600 of them in stock at $395 over spot. That's as good of a buy on 100-ounce bars, Royal Canadian Mint 100-ounce bars, as I've seen in 2 years. And if I were going to pick one of the 4 items, this might be the one that I would buy. The next one is, which one are you going to put up there, Elijah? This is from last week. I was able to accumulate a bunch of 10-ounce and kilo coins from Singapore. A client sold them back from Singapore and sent them in to us, and It was $3 million worth. We still have quite a few of the 10-ounce silver Kookaburras at $5.50 over the price of silver. That is lower than the special price that we listed them for last week. I'm really trying hard to give people, because I think it's getting more and more serious, an opportunity to get what I think is an amazing coin, or all four of these are great, but this is really cool. It's like a little hockey puck, 10-ounce Kookaburra for $5.50 over spot. We have two other items, the kilo koala. This looks like even a little bigger than a hockey puck. These are incredibly impressive coins. And at $4.50 over spot, here again, you're not going to find anyone in the country that is going to touch these prices. And that's why I guess we call them a special. I really, really sharpened my pencil on these because I think it's the right time and the right thing to do. Love these coins as well. And we have quite a few of those. These came from Singapore as well. And then the last thing that we have are the 100-gram Valcambi bars. And they're $89 over melt. And they're expensive. Valcambi charges a lot of money for them. That silver bar there is about as thin as a baseball card. The production of it is much more, it's obviously much more difficult to do and intricate. Those pieces snap off into 101-gram pieces. And, it's the ultimate form of barter. God forbid we have to use silver to trade. Each piece is a 1-gram piece of silver. So it does have a higher price above melt, but I have yet to find anyone in the country that is even close to this price on these. So those four specials, to me, are as good of a value as you will find anywhere in the country. They're going to give you utility at the same time. They are giving you a good price. And I think you want to try and find a nice mix between utility and price. So whether it be a kilo or 100-ounce or a 1 gram, you've got what you need here. But more importantly, before we ran these, we really searched high and low to make sure we were offering your listeners first crack at this, which is the best price in the United States. And when we do these with you on Tuesdays, your listeners always get the first crack at it. So my way of saying thank you for what has been an amazing 2 years of getting to know people that you and your whole family, who I respect immeasurably. My way of saying thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. And folks, you'll see it if you need to look back at those. They'll be in the recorded video that'll go live as soon as this is done. And they're also in the description of the video. So if you need to refer to that as well. The one question that we hadn't gotten to that I thought we should was asked by about 3 different people. And you touched on it earlier, Andy, when you said if interest rates spike, the markets, real estate, stocks, and bonds may all collapse together. And Rick Rule has always talked about even mining stocks, gold mining, silver mining stocks are stocks, and they'll initially get pulled down with the others. And some people have said even precious metals get pulled down in sympathy with the other markets when there's this reflexive rush to, fiat or whatever is perceived to be the king at the time. But the question is, if people are waiting for that crisis moment when the markets plunge, and that's their whole strategy, is to then snag up a whole bunch of physical metals. What actually happened, say, back in the last time in March of 2020, and most recently, when there was a big crash down in the spot price of silver, for example? What happened to the premiums? You mentioned it before, I think, on retail products like 1 ounce American Silver Eagles, that kind of thing. But what happened even on the larger bars at that time?
The first time I ever noticed it was 2008, and in 2008, silver went from 21 to 9 and gold from 1,000 to 700 in a very quick period of time. And when that happened, everything dried up, was gone. Now, you would think if the price of something was plummeting by 60 and 30% respectively, that everyone's dumping it onto the market. You get all you want on fire sale prices. It was the opposite of that. It was a paper drive-by shooting. The prices got smashed and all the physical dried up. And I thought we were going out of business. I've talked about this before on your show. David Morgan, my buddy, called me and said there's a company that's here in Washington called Pyromet. They make they're involved in medical devices, and they have stockpiled silver out of the back of x-ray machines for years. They want to fill a void, and they started making these ugly 100-ounce bars that didn't even say silver. They said 100 ounces, but it was the only thing the industry had to sell. As the price was collapsing, everything was gone. And when we were finally allowed to make purchases again from the US Mint or the Canadian Mint, you were paying a 100% premium to a $9 spot price with 8-week delivery delays. You're paying $18 with $9 silver, and you would wait 2 months to get your Eagles or your Maples or whatnot. That's when I really woke up to the fact that this was being controlled, that the price was being controlled on COMEX, and it was completely non-reflective of the physical demand, which every major mint in the world was either sold out completely or shut down or 8 to 12 weeks back ordered. And then if we go to March 2020, same thing. You have a collapse of the stock market, and then gold and silver get clubbed. Now, everyone tries to tell you that this is a rush to liquidity, that there's so much margin debt that the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, that gold and silver are very liquid, so they get sold up. That's crap. It's the same crap that we see over and over again by the commercial banks who are continuing to manipulate the market, because gold and silver are the screaming canary in the gold mine. And they don't want people to see gold and silver taking off, exacerbating the fear and the exodus out of the traditional assets. And one of these days, that's not going to happen, where you're not going to see the markets collapse and gold and silver collapse with it. It is not a rush to liquidity. It is damage control. When it happened in March, same thing. You had $11 silver. You couldn't find anything for under 21. And so you were paying 100% premium again, nearly. And, massive delivery delays. There's been a divorce between COMEX price and the demand in physical product. I mean, look, JM bullion was sold for I don't know how many hundreds of millions, $100 million or whatever last year, because the demand was off the charts. They're doing enough business to warrant being bought for that, right? So, the price wouldn't tell you that, right? The price says, well, it hasn't done anything. It's gone sideways. No, the price is being manipulated, as is the rhetoric. The physical demand is off the charts, and it's not just here in North America, it's globally. People are running to accumulate gold and silver, the smart people, but the people that are running, and I always make joke, it's the pimple on the elephant's butt. It's grown, it's a big pimple now. It's not the little tiny one. But when the elephant starts running is when everything gets really very frightening. But to the point, you cannot wait for this. The supply is as tenuous as it's ever been. How long has it been since I have issued a 1-ounce coin as a special? It's been all year I haven't, because they're so darn hard to get. Premiums are ridiculous. It just hasn't paid off. I just will simply tell you that if you see, and you might see another smashdown. I mean, the desperation oozes from these people. And if you see the markets collapse, like I think inevitably they will, yeah, maybe you will see them try to bring down gold and silver with it to keep people from really panicking. But again, it's short-lived at best, because this time it's different. This time it's going to come as a currency crisis, not a credit crisis like we saw in 2008. This will be a currency crisis where the world is dumping dollars, and it's very difficult to manipulate gold and silver in the face of a massively declining dollar. And I think that's really the difference here. Look at how high the dollar is right now. I mean, it's off the charts. So if all of a sudden the dollar is at 70 and heading to 60 on the index and collapsing, you're not going to see gold and silver go down the drain with it. So I think the way to do it, instead of waiting, is to hedge your bet and cost average. Start, if you got a certain amount of money earmarked for that moment, then break it up, divide it by 10, and start making 1/10 purchases over time. That cost averaging will smooth out the uncertainty curve. But I will tell you this, since 2008, every single collapse in prices come with a massive increase almost immediately in premium and a complete and total removal of supply. It just happens just like that. Everyone buys it up. The value hunters take everything and it's gone. And now you have more people to compete with and much more dire circumstances in that inevitable situation. I think it's the dumbest thing that someone could do. Honestly, I think it is the most naive thing someone could do. So cost average, it will smooth out the uncertainty. At least you can start to get that position intact. If I'm wrong, I'll happily admit it. And if I'm right, it will be a life raft that you've been able to slowly accumulate at least a portion of it before it becomes really difficult to get. And I think that will ultimately be the final chapter of the precious metals industry in the United States, is that you just can't get product anymore. And this is why they say there is no bull market like a metals bull market, because no one's going to sell to go back to fiat to collect a premium or a profit in that environment. And the fear is a much greater motivator than is greed. And I think we have transitioned, or will slowly, maybe all at once transition, not sure how it's going to play out, probably all at once, from greed to massive fear and trying at whatever length to get a piece of something tangible in the face of chaos, which I see coming. Wish I didn't, but I do. I got 3 kids, one of which just graduated college and is heading to New York City to work for Price Waterhouse, and another one who is going to college for her first year, and another one who's going into 10th grade. I don't take joy in saying these things. Mm-hmm. I don't take pride in being right on a lot of the things that I've said on your show over the last 2 years. I just simply think it's obvious. And if people would just open their eyes and look objectively, they'd see a lot of these things are ultimately going to play out. In the end, Mother Nature and mathematics win. You can't run from, you can run, but just like Father Time, you'll be caught, will be caught. The bill will have to be paid. And I think that's why you don't wait for that moment. I think that is way too big of a gamble.
Well, Andy, I wanted to thank you for hanging out with us so long tonight. We went over because I just think we were just so engrossed in the conversation. It's not only timely, it's extremely important. It's vital for all of us, for all of our children, our grandchildren, and so on. And I also wanted to give credit and thank you to those who are participating in the live chat. There have been a lot of people asking a lot of good questions out there, over 800 concurrent viewers currently. And all of you who have connected in for these live streams, you're a lot of what makes this community what it is and helps us to help each other. When you ask a question, you're probably helping somewhere between 10 and 100 other people who are getting an answer to the question that you asked. So just thank you, Andy, for being here. And thanks everyone in the chat.
Yeah, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to you and everyone out there too. Look, one last thing, you know, I started this company almost 33 years ago. I take great pride in it. I'll be 52 years old this summer. I've done it over half my life. Yes, I make a living in it. But, you know, over 32 years, it wasn't always as easy as it is now to sell precious metals. I take great pride in where my company has gone and working with people like you. But I don't take great joy in saying these things. As I've often said, I look at gold and silver not to get wealthy. I look at it as wealth. And I try to be objective. When I look at what's made me successful, amongst other things, it's trying to be objective. Try to poke holes in an argument. Try to look at it from, are the things that I'm saying out there to tens of thousands of people stupid? Could you poke holes in it? And I think to myself, you know what? I don't put my money anywhere else but either into my company or into physical metal. And either I'm naive or I'm not seeing the world the right way, or I'm just, you know, opening spilling my guts to everyone out there, telling people how I feel. And sometimes I wonder, am I making a mistake being as open as I am? And then I talk to guys like you, and it makes me feel good about what we're doing, what we're trying to do. And yeah, I make a living doing it. But as God is my witness, I believe in the things that I'm saying, and I really hope I'm wrong on all of it. I would gladly eat crow and apologize to the whole community out there and say I was wrong, but I don't think I am, unfortunately. And the progression of events that we've seen and talked about and how they're starting to actually play out only crystallizes the way I look at things. So thank you for giving me a platform and allowing me to chat with you openly and everyone else out there. If nothing else, I hope people understand I'm sincere, and I know you guys are too. And I just think we've crossed that Rubicon right now, and it's time to open up your eyes and start to mitigate your exposure right now to dollars and dollar-based assets. Because if this thing happens, I really do think this will not be a slow, gradual de-dollarization. This is going to happen all at once, and the actions of our government are the pushing of Russia out of SWIFT, I think, is going to have massive ramifications that when the switch is flipped, it's going to happen really, really quick. So to your last question, Elijah, should we wait and do this at that moment? No, I think that moment is going to overwhelm us all. So anyways, not to belabor the situation, thank you. It's always great to be here, and I love these live streams, and thanks for all the questions, and I look forward to picking up as usual on Tuesday of next week. In the meantime, I hope you both and everyone out there has a great evening. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Thanks for joining us, Andy. Elijah, thanks for pulling this all together. And thanks again, everyone on the chat. We'll see you again soon. And make sure you share this widely. If you have family members that think you're crazy, at least you can show them that, hey, here's 900 other people that we're all being crazy together and trying to learn, because we really are trying to help each other be aware and prepared, help as many of our families get through what's coming as we possibly can. So thank you all for being here.